What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to our Water's Edge Sunday morning online worship experience. Once again, and we say this every week, for those of you that continue to like and share our online worship experiences and share them with your circle of influence, or for those of you that continue to invite people to our live and in-person services every single Sunday at 9:30 and 11:15, thank you so very much for doing that. Continue to do that. We have new people showing up and tuning in from all over the place, getting help with their heart and their life and their faith and their storms and their walk with God. Also, for those of you that continue to worship with us every single week through a very beautiful and holy and sacred way to worship, and that's through giving and generosity, thank you so very much for doing that. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son." When we love, we give. And when we love God, and when we love God's church, and when we love the mission that Jesus has for His local church and our local community, then we want to worship through giving and generosity. And every time you worship with us through giving and generosity, you allow us to help more people, shelter more people, feed more people, love more people, serve more people, baptize more people, reach more people, and show our community and our city the body of Christ and the love of God. All right, so today we continue with our brand new series, and this series is about peace and what brings us peace. This series is about joy and what brings us joy. This series is about rediscovering passion in our faith again, and inspiration in our faith again, and joy in our faith again, and strength in our faith again, and a deep intimacy with God in our faith again as we go through the most difficult times in our life. Whenever I feel alone and scared, I have to tell you that I've found something. Whenever I feel really scared and confused or paralyzed by my circumstances, I have found something. Whenever I feel overwhelmed with storms, overwhelmed with confusion, overwhelmed with anxiety, overwhelmed with regret or pain or whatever it is, I have found something in those moments to be my medicine, to be my hiding place, to be my refuge, and to be my strength. Whenever I personally and intimately worship Jesus in a real way, that's when His grace becomes alive in me. And that's when His love becomes alive in me. And that's when His joy and His mercy becomes alive in me. Whenever I personally worship Jesus in a very real and deep and intimate way, this is when I get reminded all over again that He loves me and He will always love me, and He's never going to leave me, and He's never going to let me go, you either, and He's never going to forsake us, and He will never give up on us ever either. Whenever I personally and intimately worship Jesus in a real way, I can feel Him holding on to me with His presence. I can feel Him holding on to me with His Spirit. I can feel Him holding on to me with His love and with His compassion for my life and His purpose for my life. My personal worship is my personal space that I run to in my personal storms. And in this place, Jesus holds on to me and I hold on to Him. He's worth loving. He's worth praising. He's more than enough. He is the Lord. He's worth seeking. He's worth serving. He's worth showing other people how good His love is. He is more than enough, and He is the Lord. He is worth lifting up. He is more than enough for us today, and He is Lord. I exalt Thee. This series is about you and I falling in love. Falling in love with Jesus all over again, falling in love with how precious we are to Jesus and how precious Jesus is to us, and falling in love with worship all over again. Because it's when we worship that we find freedom. It's when we worship that Jesus overwhelms us with His love. It's when we worship that we are set free. And starting today and over the next few weeks, I want to try to do this. I want to paint a new and a fresh picture of Jesus for us today, to see Jesus in a way like maybe we've never really seen Him before. And as we do this, I want this to provoke us. Let's let it provoke us to rediscover our passion and our worship and our intimacy and our love for Jesus and our relationship with Jesus all over again. And today, I want to share with you some radical and some very, some uncommon things about Jesus that have caused me personally, when I looked at this, just to have a renewed fire and a renewed passion and a renewed worship for Jesus. Really, just falling in love with Jesus all over again as I see this fresh picture and vision of Jesus. I'm going to share some things about Jesus with you today, because when I understood these things about Jesus Christ, I couldn't help but worship Him more, and I couldn't help but fall in love with Him even more. Today, I want us to see how Jesus stepped over the line. Today I want us to see how Jesus broke the rules of religion so he could love and welcome and transform people like me and people like you. There's no one like Jesus. And today I want us to see how Jesus was a rule breaker for my sake and for your sake. Back in the days of Jesus, you had religious rules, you had social rules, you had legal rules, moral rules, and never once did Jesus ever say, follow the rules. He never said, follow the rules of religion, follow the rules of society, follow these legal or social or moral rules. He never said that. This is what he said. He said, follow me. As we look at the life of Jesus, we see that Jesus broke these rules, and the reason why he did was so that he could make his way to hurting people, people like you, people like me. Back in the days of Jesus, there was something called, and remember this today and notice this, if you're still with me, say I'm still with you, the untouchable rule. Let's say that you lived 2,000 years ago in the same area that Jesus was, and you somehow got a disease that was visible, like leprosy, something that was very visible, something that was deadly, incurable. Many people thought that you got that disease because you were being punished by God or by the gods because of your mistakes and because of your failures. You had to separate yourself from the rest of society if you got a disease like this. You had to move about 20 miles outside the city gate. And if you were walking down the street, and someone who did not have a disease was walking down the street towards you in the opposite direction, you had to get on the other side of the road. And before they even made it to you, you had to start shouting, get away, I'm unclean. I'm unclean, get away from me. Get away, I'm unclean. You had to walk on the other side of the road. You had to isolate yourself. You were rejected over and over again. You were outcasted over and over again. You were lonely over and over again and considered unclean. And if someone touched you, they were considered unclean and they were rejected also. Let me say that again. If someone touched you and you were considered unclean because of this disease, then they were considered unclean and they were rejected also. Back then, it was a sin. It was wrong to come in contact with such people. But notice Jesus. Notice this today. Large crowds followed Jesus as he came down the mountainside. Suddenly, a man with leprosy approached him and knelt before him. Lord, the man said, if you were willing, you can heal me and make me clean. Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing, he said, be healed. And instantly the leprosy disappeared. Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. In a world where the rule was to stay far away and never reach out to and never touch the dying and never touch the sick and the disease, or it would make you unclean also and you would not be right with God if you did that also. In a world where you were isolated if you had such a disease, no human contact. No human love, no human encouragement, nothing but loneliness, isolation, and rejection. And right here in this passage, we fall in love with Jesus because we see Jesus reaching out to this man to touch him, to be near him. He broke the rule because the rules were keeping this man away from the love of God. And Jesus considered his heart and his soul and his life more important than the rules. And he's done the same thing for you and I. There is no one like Jesus, which is why we exalt him. Let's move on as we continue to paint this amazing picture of Jesus. Back in the days of Jesus, there was also something known as, and notice this today, the justice rule. And this rule stated that if you got caught in like a very immoral sin, then you had to be put to death by stoning. But again, notice Jesus. We pick up today with another passage. As Jesus was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? John chapter 8, verses 3 through 5. And do you remember what Jesus said? Notice this today. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Judgment, religious shame, nothing but judgment. But right here in this passage, we fall in love with Jesus because we see Jesus reaching out to this woman with nothing but love and compassion and forgiveness and transformation in his heart. He broke the rule because these rules was keeping this lady, this woman, away from God. And Jesus considered her life and her heart and her love more important than these rules. And he's done the same for you and I. There is no one like Jesus, which is why we exalt him. We move on. Back in the days of Jesus, there was something called, and notice this, the race and gender rules. Back in the days of Jesus, a very strict, religious Jewish man would say something like this, and statements like this were very common back then. And notice this, thank God I'm not a woman, a Samaritan, or a dog. So apparently they were sexist, chauvinist, prejudiced, racist, and I guess they didn't like their pets very well either. This was the law. This was the religious rule. Also back then, the testimony of women was not believed in public or in court, and they were never allowed in leadership roles, but Jesus blew that out of the water and stepped right over those lines and broke those rules. We pick up with another passage today. Soon, a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, please give me a drink. He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some burritos from Taco Bell. The woman was surprised, for the Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, you're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you even talking to me? Why are you asking me for a drink? Jesus replied, if you only knew the gift of God that He has for you, you would ask me for a drink, and I would give you living water. John chapter 4, verses 7 through 10. In this scene, Jesus breaks the rules, the religious rules, the race rules, the gender rules. He broke the rule because the rules was keeping this woman away from God and the love of God, and Jesus considered her heart and her life and her potential and her future more important than the rules. Jesus considered her heart and her life and her potential and her future more important than the rules. Jesus also included a group of women in His leadership ministry as disciples. There was literally a group of women that were leaders that held Him up with encouragement and support and love. Right here, we fall in love with Jesus and we exalt Him. Jesus didn't see their race. He didn't see their gender. He didn't see their differences. He didn't see the rules. When He saw, what He saw first was their heart. What He saw first was their humanity and their souls and their futures and their potential. And He's done the same for you and I. And this provokes us to worship. Next is this, and notice this today. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. There was the Sabbath rule. The religious law was, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. No work can be done on the Sabbath day. That was a sin. That was unholy. No work whatsoever. You couldn't even pick up something off the ground and carry it. You couldn't pick up a stick. You couldn't clip your toenails and carry them up a staircase. That was considered work. No work. Only rest on the Sabbath and only worship. But notice the scene. John chapter 5, verses 8 through 11. There was a paralyzed man who needed to be healed, and this was on the Sabbath. Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened, notice this, on the Sabbath. So the Jewish religious leaders objected. They said to the man who is cured, you can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat. But he replied, the man who healed me told me to pick it up and walk. The man who healed me doesn't care about these rules. He told me after He healed me to stand up and walk in that healing. He set me free. And He told me after He set me free to stand up and walk and live in that freedom. You see what religion does? Religion, Jesus will set you free, and religion tries to put you back in prison. Religion, listen, religion will put you in bondage. Jesus will set you free, and religion will say, you can't walk in that freedom. Religion tries to put us back in a prison, in the prison of guilt and rules and legalism and bondage to shame. Jesus broke that rule. I just healed you, He said. Get up and walk in it. I just set you free. Get up and live in it. He broke the rule because the rules was keeping this person away from the love of God. And Jesus considered his heart and his life and his future and his potential more important than the rules. And He's done the same for you and I. There was no one like Jesus. And this is why we worship Him and we exalt Him. Now, here's the final scene that the text paints for us today. And remember this, there was also the traditional and social rule. The traditional and social rule. Tax collectors and sinners. Sinners and tax collectors. You should not be friends with them. They were lower than spit and lower than mud. They have been kicked out of the synagogues. They are not good enough for us. They cannot worship with us. They are unholy. They are lower than dirt. This is what the strict religious Jewish people believed back then about tax collectors and sinners. Notorious sinners, some verses say. They're not good enough and they're not holy enough for you. Separate from them. You're supposed to be holy. They are unholy. You have to keep this separated. Back in the days of Jesus, if a rabbi was called by this nickname, a friend of sinners, his career was over. That also makes you unholy. And this was his nickname. And notice this. This is what they called Jesus. A friend of sinners. That was his nickname. Notice the text, Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. If you're still with me, say I'm still with you. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Tax collectors were rejected, considered unholy, not allowed in the synagogues. But here comes Jesus, calling Matthew to be one of his disciples, breaking the rules. See, religion will shame you for having dirty feet. Jesus will kneel down and wash your feet. Let me say that again. Religion will shame you for having dirty feet. Jesus will stoop down and wash your feet. How undignified for a leader. But he broke that rule too, teaching us to serve the hurting. But that's not all. Matthew chapter 11, verse 19. And notice this. The Son of Man, on the other hand, eats and drinks. And you say he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and other sinners. But wisdom is shown to be right by its results. They called Jesus the worst nickname ever, a friend of sinners. Why? Because he was a friend to tax collectors and sinners. That's why they called him a friend of sinners, because he was a friend to tax collectors and sinners. And this was the catalyst that got him killed. This was the catalyst that got him crucified. He broke the rules because the rules were keeping people that God loved away from God. And Jesus considered people more important than the rules. And he's done the same for you and I. There was no one like Jesus. And this is why we continue to glorify his name today and exalt him. This Jesus we fall in love with. This Jesus we worship with a mad, wild passion. This Jesus, he does not shame us, but he changes us with his love. This Jesus is a friend of sinners. This Jesus breaks all the rules to draw close to me and to draw close to you. This Jesus is worthy of our worship and our love and our faith and our passion. And today we want to fall more in love with this Jesus, and today we exalt him in our heart. If you love this Jesus, then continue to stay tuned in for an amazing time of worship with the amazing Water's Edge worship team. And let's continue to pour our heart out to him and have a very deep and intimate and personal time of worship right now as we open up our spirit and open up our heart and let him move on us and change us with his love. Thank you so very much for tuning in today. Thank you so very much for hanging out with us. Now continue to stay tuned in for this amazing time of worship. We cannot wait to see you back next week, and we love you all.